Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
Exploring the unexplained,
breaking down barriers,
putting the macabre under the microscope,
dissecting the disturbing,
seeking out the sinister,
bringing you the jinkies and the jump scares. Ayo demons, it's your girl Devin and her co-host
Megan, and I don't know how to follow that. That was just too high.
I thought I'd just mix it up a little this week.
I like it.
Thank you. I try my best.
Welcome back, guys. We have a rather grueling topic this week.
Yeah, it was a little hardcore to research this topic.
I had to break to watch videos of puppies.
Yeah. You need just a little cute break when you're researching stuff like this. I found that with a couple episodes, but this one specifically. And some future ones coming up. Yeah, so look forward to that, guys.
But yeah, I think very recently we did an episode on urban legends.
Yes, relatively recently.
And leading on from that, we thought we'd follow up with the effects of urban legends.
Yeah, because sometimes they don't just stay urban legends. People take them
way too far.
A little seriously.
Well, let's just start at the beginning and what exactly an urban legend is. Pretty much they are widely spread, unproven stories. And they usually feature around unusual and really peculiar events. And typically I think they tend to sort of convey a cautionary warning of some kind.
Yeah.
And they tend to also evoke really strong emotions in people, normally horror, shock, and revulsion. Sometimes humor, but not often.
I remember watching a couple of years ago, it's actually a documentary by some documentary filmmakers that have made some amazing films. It was called Killer Legends or something like that, where they investigated urban legends and where the story sort of originated. And a lot of times these urban legends do come from things that have happened, but the story is vastly different.
Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Exactly.
But I actually read a study on this whole thing, and it's remember that broken telephone game where somebody whispers a message in one person's ear, and as you pass it on, it gets more twisted and warped.
And
so
I think just as humans, we like to just, add a bit of spice to everything.
We definitely do. So it's definitely a case of a broken telephone game.
Yeah.
But like you said, a lot of the time there is a true origin of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are so many urban legends out in the world, as we described some in the last episode. And I mean, just off the bat, there's the Bloody Mary one, the woman who was executed for being a witch and will show her face in the mirror if you call on her.
Yeah.
There's the vanishing hitchhiker, which we've actually spoken about in our road.
This is the Uniondale
Yeah,
hitchhiker.
exactly.
But we did say also in that episode that is a story that's sort of all over the world. People have different versions
exactly.
of it.
There's the Hookman story, which is that really cliche man with a hook who comes up on a couple making out in a car and kills them.
I think that was actually one of the stories that was in that Killer Legends documentary.
Really?
So if any of our listeners are interested in that sort of thing, that's definitely a documentary I would recommend.
I think I myself need to go watch that.
It's really good, and I know you don't like scary stuff, so it's a lot more factual than it is scary, and it's really interesting.
And I mean, you also get some bizarre urban legends. There's a legend of a woman with her hair. She kept her hair in a beehive and used so much hairspray until one day she dropped dead because there'd been a spider living in her hair that had climbed down and bitten her.
That sounds like my nightmare, but it's also really hilarious. I think the one that always freaked me out, I feel like we're going on a tangent here because we have so much more to talk about, but one that always freaked me out was the one with the girl who always had the dog that lay under her bed and she'd put her hand down and the dog would lick her hand.
Now, what's interesting about that is we've spoken about that before and we both heard the story, but differently.
Versions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, broken telephone. And I think for psychology, people think that urban legends are a way to make sense of the world and manage a threat in a safe environment. And as well, I think we also spoke about this. We'll get more into that, about people have been telling ghost stories around the campfire for generations. I mean, years and years and years. So it's nothing new. But we are definitely in new generation of viral urban legends.
Yeah.
We have the internet and it can spread so much easier.
There's so much more access to
Exactly.
that sort of thing. Yeah.
But let's round it back up to the case we will be focusing on, the case of the Slenderman stabbing.
Yeah, I feel like that's also like one of the most recent sort of urban legends that have spawned something a little darker.
And quite one of the most shocking, actually.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, Slenderman's actually popped up in video games, movies. He's like taken on quite a life of his own, where he just started as a Photoshop work of art.
Yeah.
That one artist made for a competition on.
It was on the Something Awful forums,
Yes,
I believe.
it was.
It's like a creepypasta meme.
Exactly. It was a competition for people to take Photoshop and create a scary character, make it look as real as possible.
Yeah, I think the whole thing was to make it seem like it was real, even if it wasn't.
Exactly. And this guy created Slenderman, and from there, he never even created the story of Slenderman, just the picture, and from there it took on a life of its own, and people on Creepypasta and all these other platforms started writing Slenderman's story.
As far as I know, did he not create the sort of thing of Slenderman would target children? I think he gave a loose mythos.
Yes, you're right. There was actually a little quote he put underneath one of his pictures. And that was what sort of alluded to the fact that he had something to do with children.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with Slenderman, just like a brief description of him, he's a creepy dude. He's sort of like abnormally tall. He's got a featureless face.
Hangs around in forests. He wears like a tall... he wears a black suit. As you said, featureless face. Sometimes is shown with tentacles coming out of his back. And he can stretch his arms to like abnormal lengths, apparently.
I didn't know that. I'm not sure if the whole like tendril thing was part of the original.
I don't know either. I don't think it was.
Yeah. Because I remember, must have been years ago, probably around like 2014-ish, maybe even before that, I came across the pictures online, and I'm not gonna lie, little old gullible me was like, what is this? Like, it was like UFO, I want to believe sort of thing.
Exactly.
So I'm not gonna lie, for a hot second I was convinced. I was like, these pictures look legit.
They were done really well, and that's an interesting thing that you're saying that, because that's what led to this case. It was people believing really hard and wanting to believe that this was a real thing.
The difference is that, like, when it comes to like supernatural, paranormal stuff, if I do believe it, I do all my research to make sure that I'm believing it. And within like an hour, I was like, oh, okay, it's fake.
But that's what I'm saying. The creepypasta sites and that, they do such a good job of the things that they create. It's difficult to separate fiction from reality. I think I read their Russian sleep experiment and was fully convinced about that one.
Was that not No Sleep?
One of them, but
they're like very much the same sort of thing, though. Yeah.
But Slenderman actually, so supposedly, can cause amnesia, coughing, which they call slender sickness, paranoid behavior. Yes.
Yeah, no, sorry. Just the whole like slender sickness thing. I can't remember, but I remember when I first started getting into Slenderman, and I was like, this is so creepy. I love it. I got sort of drawn into Marble Hornets, which was a web series based on the Slenderman. It was probably one of the most well known. It's subsequently ended, but anyway. And I was so certain that they created the whole like slender sickness mythos, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure where that one come from. But like I said, so many people contributed to the story. It's really difficult to tell what came from where, actually.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress. Carry on.
I know that he's normally shown in leafless forests and usually behind children. And supposedly some of the things he can do to you is he can remove your organs, he can impale you on trees, and stalk you slowly and slowly drive you to madness. And he's normally associated with sudden disappearance and death. Like I said, there's a lot of different versions of what Slenderman is and what he can and can't do.
Yeah, no, like I said, a lot of my understanding of Slenderman and like the mythos and everything came from Marble Hornets, because I was obsessed with that series. It was so good. And like I said, it has subsequently ended, but it was so good. And I think a lot of what I believed the Slender mythos to be came from that.
He's kind of like a gothic Pied Piper. He calls out to children and then leads them away and they're never seen again.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Kind of like that.
Supposedly, when he allows children to stay in their homes, then he infects them with a desire to kill and a longing to be initiated into his darkness and innermost circle.
Didn't know that. Makes a lot of sense with what we're going to get to, though.
So, yeah, he was created by Eric Knudsen, and that was just as a Photoshop document. Yeah. And the little caption he had at the bottom there was, "We didn't want to go, we didn't want to kill them, but a persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." And he was shown standing behind a group of children.
I know sort of at one point there was sort of like a resurgence of the like Slenderman thing. And they sort of made him almost like an anti-hero who protected children from bullies and stuff and would sort of kill the bullies and then protect these children that were picked on.
Well, that's relevant to the three girls that actually got involved in this whole case. Yeah. And that was because the three of them were actually very lonely and they didn't have many friends. And when they all found each other, they latched on.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's actually dive into the Slenderman case. It's quite a horrifying thing to picture, especially with 11, 12-year-old girls.
That must be said first and foremost, is this happened to three girls aged like 11, 12, and that's just crazy. Like, you're not even a proper human.
Exactly. So let's paint the picture. It was a Friday night in late spring of 2014 in a small city of Waukesha, Wisconsin. And there were 6th grade girls, 3 of them, celebrating Morgan Geezer's birthday. I think they skated for hours at a disco roller rink.
Yeah.
They then went, that was Morgan Geezer, Nisa Wires, and Peyton Lutner, who they called Bella.
Yeah.
And like I said, the 3 of them weren't so popular at school. They were more childish than others. They were more obsessed with fantasy and video games and making up scary stories. And Morgan cast herself as quite a creative weirdo. And she related to a new friend, Anissa, on this level, especially through science fiction.
Anissa was sort of like the newer of the friend group.
Yes, I think her parents had just had a divorce and she just moved into sort of the neighborhood.
Yeah, and Peyton and Morgan had been friends since they were like really young, if I'm not mistaken.
That's what I understood as well. But yeah, the girls got back to their house, played some games as girls do. They greeted their cats, and then they headed to Morgan's room and fell asleep. I never slept at sleepovers, but oh well.
Yeah, that wasn't a thing.
On that morning when they woke up, played some games, ate some breakfast of donuts and strawberries.
I love how you have all of these like
details. I'm painting a picture here. Let's go with it.
Let's go with it.
And then Morgan got her mother's permission to walk to a small park nearby.
And interesting, can I just interject here?
Please do.
I was watching a couple video interviews with the parents of all of the girls, and Morgan's mother said that it was weird because she was actually very protective of Morgan and wouldn't really let her out alone. So the fact that she actually let the girls go off to the park was like, not the norm.
Normal.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was a bad choice to make on that day.
Yeah.
Because as the girls headed to the playground with Bella in the lead, Morgan lifted her jacket to show Anissa what she had tucked into her waistband. And there was a steak knife from the kitchen.
Yeah.
And Anissa wasn't surprised because the two of them had been talking about this for months.
Yeah, I think it was something like 6 months already that they'd been talking about it for a while.
Yeah. Like planning this while riding on the bus. They used code words like a camping trip to refer to the Nicollet National Forest, I believe, which is where they believed Slenderman lived. So yeah, the girls played on swings, and then Anissa suggested that they go and play hide and go seek in the woods at the edge of the forest.
Yeah, sorry, I keep going back to these interviews that I watched with the parents, and I don't know if it was, said initially to the mother or if it sort of came out afterwards. But apparently Morgan's mom said that they wanted to go to the forest because they believed that there was a mansion in the middle of the woods that the Slenderman lived in.
Exactly. That's why I said that we. I don't think we actually even touched on the fact that these girls were obsessed with Slenderman.
Yeah.
especially Morgan and Anissa, they found his story online and they became absolutely obsessed with him. And yeah, they believed that he lived in the mansion in the woods there. And the two of them devised this plan to appease him so that they could become his minions and go and live in his mansion with him.
Doesn't sound that appealing to me,
It
but
doesn't
okay.
either to me, but okay, yeah. So yeah, the girls asked Bella to go and play hide and go seek in the woods, and they went. And there, on Anissa's cue, Morgan stabbed Bella in the chest, and then in her arms, and then in her legs, and then near her heart.
Yeah.
By the time she stopped, she'd stabbed her 19 times.
Apparently, it took 2 nurses to count the amount of stab wounds on her body.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
And the reason they did this, like I said, was to prove the existence of Slenderman to their families and friends, and to prove their loyalty to him so that they could go and, like I said, live in his mansion and become his servants.
It sort of makes me wonder, because I mean, I was saying earlier about how this thing came up where they said the Slenderman was sort of this anti-hero that looked after the bullied, and so is that maybe that was their sort of thinking, is that like he would protect them because they were sort of outcasts? No?
Maybe, though I did hear an account from Anissa saying she was so scared he was going to come after her family.
Oh, yeah. I
So
remember that.
I think a part of it was also to stop him from coming after their families, that they believed that they needed to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know. But after getting stabbed 19 times, of course, Bella was screaming, managed to somehow rise up, but she couldn't walk straight.
I'm pretty sure I also heard that, you know, after they stabbed her, they said they were going to go get her help.
Well, that's the thing. She tried to stand up and walk to the edge of the forest, and the two of them braced her by her arms and led her deeper into the woods, further from the trail, and then ordered her to lie down and claimed they would go get help. But they did not intend to, and they left her lying there.
Yeah.
So what's funny about that is they initially had planned the attack the day before. They planned to tape her mouth shut and stab her in the neck and then flee. But then Morgan Geezer actually wanted to give her one more day to live.
Oh, gee, how kind.
The second plan was then to attack Bella in the bathroom at the park because there were drains for her blood.
This is like the amount of thought that these 12-year-olds put into killing their friend.
Disturbing, exactly.
What?
But yes, the actual attack they planned out was the one they played out in the woods. And 2 of the wounds were to major organs, and they missed one major artery by her heart by less than 1 millimeter.
Yeah, no, I heard about that, and I also, in my research, came across, I mean, not for the faint of heart, but they had like photos of her clothing where you can actually see the stab holes in her shirt and stuff. It's absolutely
That is
crazy.
horrifying.
Yeah.
And apparently when it came down to doing the actual deed, Morgan handed Anissa the knife, and Anissa felt too squeamish and handed it back to her. And in Morgan's words, she said, "Okay, but I'm not going to do it until you tell me to." And then Anissa said, "Go ballistic, go crazy, do it now."
Wow.
It's wow. Disturbs you on every level.
You can almost like, you can almost hear that there was apprehension on both sides for the girls. You know, Anissa not wanting to do it because she was too squeamish, and Morgan saying, "I'm not going to do it until you tell me."
Exactly.
Yeah.
The two of them then took off, and 5 hours later were picked up by where they were resting along the grass on Interstate 94 around there. And they were approached carefully because the sheriff's deputies were aware they possible suspects in a stabbing.
Yeah.
But they were really confused by their age. And the 2 girls were taken in, especially after they noticed blood on the clothes when handcuffing them.
Yeah.
And he asked, where did this blood come from? And Morgan very bluntly just stated, well, she was forced to stab her best friend.
But I also know that Morgan's mom said that she was just sort of at home, and suddenly the police rocked up in riot gear, and she was sort of like, what's going on? She thought the children had been kidnapped because they said, your daughter's like, well, they initially said, where is your daughter? And she said she's at the park with her friends. And they thought that she was hiding Morgan in the house. They searched the house, and then she believed that the kids had actually been kidnapped.
Oh my word. It's such a horrible thing for everyone but the parents.
Yeah.
I mean, to hear that your 12-year-old girl has gone and done something
Yeah.
like that.
Or that's happened to your 12-year-old.
12-year-old, exactly. And I mean, yeah, these two, like we said, they planned it out. They even packed a trip, packed for the trip. They packed granola bars, bottles of water, photos to remember their families and friends. The police did find the knife they used in the one backpack.
There was actually, when I was looking at the photos of like the clothing and stuff, there was a picture inside the backpack, like you said, granola bars, all this like casual stuff, and then just a steak knife just in the bag.
I think that's what gets to me the most. It's this horrifying mix of innocence and then complete like horror.
Yeah. And apparently, because I obviously saw the knife and it was completely clean. And they said that the girls actually cleaned the knife off and had planned to get rid of the evidence, but sort of hadn't gotten around to it yet.
Oh, I actually never came across that one.
It's dark stuff, man.
What they didn't know was that against all odds, Bella actually survived, and she managed to drag herself to the nearby road where she was found by a cyclist, Greg Steinberg, I believe. And I actually saw an interview with him.
Yeah, same.
And he said, you could actually see it on his face. He was so in shock at finding a like 12-year-old girl with all these stab wounds, and he didn't know what to do, and he panicked.
Yeah, he said he was shaking trying to call the cops. And one really interesting thing that I heard, I don't know if it was in that interview or in an article that I read, but apparently the trail that he was on where he found her was cordoned off and you weren't supposed to be riding or walking there. So it was by chance.
Thank goodness for that chance.
Yeah. So she'd ended up on a trail where people shouldn't have been walking, but he happened to come across her.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And then, the two girls were taken in, and the questioning was also really disturbing when I read through all that. Because especially Morgan, she, sort of expressed a bit of guilt for stabbing her friend, but she said she felt it was necessary to appease Slenderman.
The one quote I remember, they asked her something like, did you not feel bad about, having to stab your friend or whatever? And she's like, yeah, I did initially, but then I realized that remorse isn't going to get me anywhere.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I also heard something where she said the bad part of her wanted Bella to die, but the good part of her did feel a bit bad about it. And it's just,
Just a smidge. That's your best friend, but okay. You felt a bit bad.
But apparently Bella actually left hospital 7 days after she was brought in, which is a much shorter time than I would have pictured.
Because I think she did it in Bella or Peyton, did an interview quite recently.
Yeah,
in the
it was
last year
very
or
recent.
So. Maybe it was even this year, I don't know. But her mom said that her body is still covered in these really red, angry scars years later.
Yes, I actually saw that interview, and when she was asked about her scars, she's got quite a fantastic, incredible outlook. She said she doesn't think much about them, and she thinks they'll just fade eventually. And she even went as far, they asked her, what would you say if you could speak to either of those two girls today? She said, I would thank them because they've inspired me to take a job in the medical career.
Oh, wow.
It's a very good person there. I don't think I would have had those responses.
Yeah, I'd be like, I don't want to speak to them.
Morgan was then sentenced to 40 years in a mental institute. And I think Anissa was initially as well.
I think she got 25 years.
Yeah, a lesser degree, but also in a mental institute.
Yeah.
In 2017, Anissa actually pleaded guilty to second-degree homicide, found not guilty by mental disease or defect.
Yeah.
And I know the whole conflict throughout this whole thing was, do they try these girls as adults? Because they can't forget the fact that this was homicide. These girls had the intent to murder. And it was an ongoing debate throughout the whole thing.
I think they were eventually
tried. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, well, you want to do crazy adult things, you get tried as an adult. Not that a normal part of adult life is killing your best friend. You don't expect it from someone so young, is all I'm saying.
But it is scary, the amount of, the belief that went into a story and how it roller coasted and snowballed from there.
And we were saying earlier that most urban legends sort of stem from something that has happened and then it sort of gets, convoluted. But this came just from someone's mind, posted as an internet meme.
It grew a life of its own.
Yeah.
And I feel quite bad because that was never the artist's intent.
Yeah.
And I think even Creepypasta and them, I mean, they stepped up and raised money to help Bella through all her medical expenses and that.
But it really wasn't their fault. It wasn't Eric Knudsen's fault. It
wasn't Creepypasta or any of those. They even said they do not condone murder or violence in any way.
I know that even the creators of Marble Hornets and shows like Tribe 12 and Everyman Hybrid got a lot of flack for, just creating the story, and they had nothing to do with the outcome of what happened with these 3 girls.
And this is what spikes up a lot of controversy today, with people saying the internet's bringing about bad things, and it's a difficult topic. It really is. But as I said to you actually a bit earlier today, people have been telling ghost stories around campfires for years and years and years. You can't really blame the internet for this.
No, and I mean, look, I'm not a parent myself, but I do, and I'm not putting all the blame on parents either, but I don't think this is an internet problem. You've got to be, especially when your kids are of that age where your emotions are very tumultuous and all over the show, you need to be keeping an eye on your kids and, knowing what they're up to and what's going on in their lives so that things like this don't happen.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. It's a scary world, but to some extent, you need to take responsibility, especially with the things you go and look at out there.
Yeah, and be able to sort of separate reality from fiction.
Know when you should step back and just, separate yourself from the topic. And on that note...
Yeah, that's pretty much all we have time for today. We were going to delve into some, other crimes that have come from urban legends, but... If you want to hear more about that, you can let us know on social media. We're at Blended Podcasts on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. So let us know if it's something that you'd want to hear more about.
This is definitely something we can come back to.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's a lot of other stories out there, similar kind of things. But we hope to see you guys next week.
Thank you for joining us.
Freaky Fridays, hosted by Devin Beatty
and Megan Portnoy, and produced with the generous assistance of Janu Blau
and Blended Podcasts.
Brought to you by Blended Audio.